The opinions expressed on this podcast are those of the speakers and presenters. They do not represent the opinions or views of the Equita Group, Equita Final Expense Services, or its affiliates.
Hello there, Chase Urich here at the Equita Home Office. Excited as always about the podcast today. In the Trenches, episode 11. We've got a very special guest for you. We've got Peter Walker on the line. If you're out there in podcast land or joining us live and you're like, I've heard that name before, but I don't know who that is, get ready. I hope you have pen and paper handy. You're going to want to get to know Peter Walker. Trust me. For those that work with him, he's made a big difference in an immediate impact in their business, helping them incorporate Medicare. It's a big deal. So we've got Peter locked and loaded, ready to go. One quick update before we get started. As I mentioned before, if you're in podcast land right now and you feel like, man, I heard this on your YouTube channel or I heard this on your iTunes channel, hit subscribe. Man, I don't have leads. I don't have mentorship. I don't have Medicare. And you'd like to learn more about how to get involved, give us a call, 800-765-0711. We'd love the opportunity to talk to you. You can also go to EFESonline.com. You're going to see a chat pop up, a gentleman by the name of Ryan. You're going to see his face. Start chatting with him. Tell him you want to get started. Tell him what you need. Do you need leads? Do you need, a platform that allows training and mentorship? Whatever it may be, we can help you. And it's a great opportunity to get plugged in and kind of fill in the gaps that are missing in your business. So I didn't want to wait, didn't want to delay. Really excited about getting Peter on with us today so we can get rolling. With that being said, let's get started. We're going to kill that music. We're going to get you unmuted. How are you today, buddy?
I'm good, mate. How are you?
I'm doing well. I appreciate, once again, like all of our speakers, I know you got a busy schedule. Lots of people calling you. You're always on the road seeing somebody, so we appreciate you, as always, spending some time with us on the podcast today.
It's my pleasure, Chaz.
So what we want to do is kind of, we know you. A lot of people, we've got a big turnout today live on the podcast. A lot of our top producers, a lot of our up-and-coming producers know you. And the big thing today is, obviously you hear us talk about it. We kind of scream it from the mountaintop. The opportunity with Medicare is a big one. But we want to get to know Peter Walker today. A lot of people, as they get to know you, they find out that, whoa, this guy he was an absolute killer. He was a top producer in the final expense market when he was out doing it, every day. We want to kind of open up, kind of give everybody a peek behind the curtain, get to know you just a little bit. So with that being said, we'll kind of start at the top, start at the genesis of it all. For everybody out there who may not know you, Peter, when did you first get started in the business?
It was actually quite recently, mate. It was around towards the end of 2015 is when I actually found insurance as an opportunity. And I really only started selling final expense in January of 2016. And so, yeah, I haven't been around very long, to be honest. I've been around a long time, obviously.
What was your bread and butter before you got into insurance? What were you doing?
So I've had quite a few different careers. I moved to Los Angeles in '95, and I started a computer company out there, and I did really, really well, and followed that up with a production company and did well with that, and then a web development company and did well with that. And then, like any other red-blooded man, I wanted to own a bar, and I opened up a bar and restaurant in 2003, which is still there, and started having children a few years ago, and just kind of figured out that Los Angeles isn't the right place to raise kids. So lo and behold, I picked Texas as a good place to raise a family, and moved to Houston to open up a branch about 5 years ago. And long story short, the economy tanked on us, the oil economy, that is, and I was right downtown, right in the middle of it, and needed a little bit of extra money on my own time and started looking around and found the final expense game. And I actually almost made a fatal mistake of joining a captive organization. And just with experience, I decided just to do my due diligence a little bit better and figured out that, you know, you could do it independently, and instead of making 60-point contracts, you can make 100-plus point contracts. And joined an organization and just, you know, ran the numbers, figured out that leads, you know, if I can actually sell these direct mail leads, maybe I can make a little bit of money. And, you know, I needed to make about $2,000 to $3,000 a month, and that was going to be enough to kind of keep me happy because I wasn't paying myself in the restaurant. And I think I started like middle of January, I started getting leads, and I wrote 17,000 in my first month, and I thought, my God, why the hell am I in the restaurant business?
Yeah, that is not a common way for most to get started. And I think your first year, I mean, I'm blown away still to this day, as long as I've known you now, since we started working together. Over 349,000 in personal production your first year. Is that right?
Yep. You know, Chase, it's real easy, man. I'm a numbers guy. You know me. You've seen me with my spreadsheets and all that other stuff, and people laugh at me. And, you know, my former upline makes fun of me for my spreadsheets. But, you know, the bottom line is planning and understanding your numbers and treating it like a business is a huge step in the right direction towards success. And so, you know, I went out and I think I started on like 30 leads a week, and I was writing X, and I found myself at the end of the week, you know, digging around the last 2 days. I'm like, my God, I don't have enough people to see. And I was, you know, running a huge area. And so I spreadsheeted everything. I'm like, well, if I add another 10 leads a week and, you know, I can keep my close ratio similar, it's going to be X. So, you know, I finally ended up, I think later in the year, I was running 50 leads a week. And, you know, I'll admit it, a lot of those were just trash canned. I was just getting enough leads to keep myself as busy as possible for the number of hours that I wanted to work. And, you know, the numbers just come. And, you know, when you're running that volume of leads, you are also accelerating your skills, you know, your knowledge of the carriers, your sales skills, everything else just accelerates along with it. So, you know, I probably had 3 years worth of experience packed into 1 year, you know, when you compare it to an agent that's only running 15 leads a week, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I've actually heard you a couple of times, more than a couple of times, talk about the ability to buy success in this business. And it sounds silly, but, you know, we always talk about the numbers never lie. They don't. And the way that you break it down, just the same, like when you hear Ben or you hear, you know, somebody like Cole McCoy, Cole's story is very powerful. At the end of the day, the numbers don't lie. And when you do the math, if you want to raise your income, you raise your activity. And you can change the mechanical things. You can get better at, you know, training-related items like presentation and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, to raise the bar, you raise your activity. And you've talked about that at road shows, in trainings here at the home office when we've had people in. And it's so true. It sounds simple, but it's so true that a lot of people kind of miss the boat on that.
Yeah, I think people, you know, look, I come from a business background, right? So with restaurants in particular, you know, if I don't have shelves full of liquor and coolers full of beer and fridges full of food to cook, I've got nothing to sell. And so for me, you know, buying leads, if that's all I've got to do is buy leads, that's my overhead. You know, the rest is gas and my car payment. I mean, it honestly, this business was such a aha moment for me. Like, my God, what am I doing? I've got 70 employees in 2 states. I've got all this inventory. I've got these 2 restaurants to run. There's constant issues. You know, and people don't realize how simple they have it in the final expense industry. You've got your own business, and, you know, if you can close, you know, I wouldn't suggest somebody go and buy 50 leads a week if they can't, you know, close at least 15-20% of the 20 leads that they're running. But once you figure out what your close ratio is, it's as simple as upping it's as simple as upping the number of leads for the amount of time that you have left in the week or the amount of time that you are willing to work. And I promise you, you can make a killing. Think about this, Chase. If somebody came to you today and you were making $30,000 a year, and let's just say you had $100,000, and they said, if you put $100,000 into this business, you'll make $100,000 profit. Would you not take that? You know, I know we do better than that. I know we do better than that in final expense, but people need to start thinking of leads as the cost of doing business, as inventory. And obviously there's money management and all the other things that come along with it. But if you are not busy by the end of the week, on Friday afternoon, if you're out of people to see, guess what? You don't have enough leads. That's just my take on it.
Well, you're spot on. It starts with, and what you alluded to is kind of having to break away from the employee mentality. And it starts there. You know, we're not used to, if we're an employee, we don't have to spend money to then invest in our business and then make money. It starts with getting rid of the employee mentality, and it kind of segues to that directly segues into what I wanted to ask you next. You know, there's a lot of things that are aha moments, as you mentioned, in this business. I'd love to know, what was your first impression? You know, we're going to get back to the investing in your business and running it like a business, and I really want to figure out what your daily routine looked like when you were doing it every day in the field. Tell me, when it comes to aha moments, what was your first impression when you got into the business?
Well, first of all, before I even went on my first ride along, I think I was looking at like job boards and stuff. I didn't want a job, right? And somebody was advertising. It was a company out of Florida, a captive organization, and they were advertising 60% commissions or something along those lines. And I'm like, there's no way. 60%. How can they pay somebody a 60% commission? That's just BS, right? So I called the guy up and I said, look, it sounds great, but I want to see this being done. And I actually went out with a lady that worked for the company, and, you know, to her credit, she sold, I think they write American Amicable. She wrote like $2,500 in a day, and it didn't take me. It wasn't hard to do the math and figure out, like, holy cow, I would have made $1,500 today if I was doing what she did, and that was my aha moment. Like, this is actually for real, and I could look. You know, the people didn't bother me. The cat pee couches and the rundown trailers and all that other stuff. You know, at the end of the day, money's green, Matt, and, you know, these are people that are in need. And so the real aha moment was that you can make a fortune in this business. You can absolutely make a fortune. And that was really it. So my routine was, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, so that was my routine, was just, you know, I came into the business thinking I want to work 1 or 2 days a week, and realizing the absolute potential that this business had. I didn't have $350,000 as a goal. I had $36,000 as a goal. I needed to make $3,000 a month. And by the middle of January, I don't even think my first leads had come in, and I had already upped them from 20 to 30. And then I think by February, I'd up to 40 leads a week. And I just decided, man, this is for me. Let's go. Let's go all the way. And I'm glad I did.
That's one of the things that, with somebody like yourself, and you have a drive, and that's a good part of what makes you successful. But you're very meticulous with the numbers, as we've already gone over. I've always kind of found it astounding that, you know, you obviously deep dive on the numbers, but you look down the road. Like, I'm going to grind today, I'm going to do this, but I'm also planning ahead. And we're going to talk about the Medicare here in just a minute, and that plays a big part into it. But as we peek into who you are, you know, what your approach is, from a personal producer perspective, what was your preferred approach when you were going out? When you started to develop your routine and you started to kind of know what your daily activity and what your schedule was going to look like, would you classify yourself as a door knocker? Were you an appointment setter, or were you a little bit of both?
Not at all, man. I'm not a door knocker. I'll be honest with you. Have I knocked doors? Sure. You know, I'll knock doors on days where there were no appointments. But I looked at the business as, from a completely different perspective. And I'm not saying, some of the top guys in our organization are door knockers and they love it. I don't love it.
Right.
I don't love, in my mind, I want to sit, if I'm not sitting in front of people, I'm paying myself a heck of a lot of money to be running around knocking on doors. And I would rather make, half the amount of sales on the same number of leads that a top door knocker makes, but I'd be sitting in front of people all the time. So plus I was working 13 odd counties, man. And, I drove 65,000 miles, that particular year. And, I wanted to be in front of people. So I'm I'd say 95% appointment setting, 5% door knocking.
I gotcha. And as we kind of segue into, getting closer and closer to finally getting to go over your routine and how you structured your day, one thing I love to ask when we're on the podcast and we're interviewing somebody who's done this at a very high level, I love to ask, obviously your goals now are different than where they were when you first started in the business. Let's kind of give everybody in the audience a little bit of a look at where you were compared to now. What were the goals? You said you needed to make 3,000, 2,000 to 3,000 a week is kind of what you were shooting for, 2,000 to 3,000 a month. How has that changed over time now, and how has that progressed in terms of your goals then and your goals now?
Well, my goals, and I'll be honest with you, are not 100%. They're not financial anymore. When I first got in the business, my goal was just to cover my nut because I wasn't paying myself out of my restaurant. And as I said, as soon as I realized the true potential of this business, and it took me, honestly, Chase, it was a couple of days. And I came back to my wife and I'm like, no, I know you're not going to believe this, because she's heard this so many times. I've done so many businesses and ventures and things, but I really think I've got to I've got to go all in on this thing. And, I think I can make $100,000 in my first year, which, by the way, for people out there listening, I was able to do it, but I also came in with some cash to be able to afford to buy leads. And I know a lot of you don't have that. And, so I made over $100,000 in my first year, well over 100,000, obviously. But my goals, other than, yes, I want to make enough money to be comfortable, but my goal is to kind of get the Medicare thing out. And I know it may sound like BS to some people out there, but I truly, when I got into the Medicare, and I realized what a game changer it was, not just financially for me, long distance income, forward income on renewals for life. But what it did for the people that I was helping, man, I love this business. I love final expense, but it can be a grind. And I tell you, when I started doing that, it made the business as a whole so much more enjoyable. And I've always had a philosophy of, if you're not having fun anymore, if you're not enjoying what you do, get the hell out. I mean, what are you doing? You're killing yourself. Find something that you're passionate about. And so my goals right now, yes, will I make money doing what I'm doing? Absolutely. I mean, it's a business, but my goal right now is to get as many final expense agents to realize, what a beautiful addition the Medicare business is. And you can call any of our guys, Roger and Dylan and any of these guys that are writing it now, and they'll tell you what a life-changing move it is. And I get a lot of pleasure out of that, a lot of satisfaction seeing people succeed. So that's my goal, is to triple the agents this year that we had last year.
I know you get satisfaction out of it, because when you're here, when you come to town and we get to spend some time together, it's so genuine, it's authentic, there's nothing fake about it. You get so fired up, as you should, because of the sweat equity. I mean, you're traveling all over the U.S., and we're going to go down this rabbit hole now because I think it's perfect timing, and it's a powerful message because of the authenticity of it. Talking to somebody the other day, I'm not going to name his name, but he's like, I wrote some Medicare, and I feel like I'm getting better. I kind of feel like I'm struggling still to be able to share with him the story of, Lovely Johnson's story. You went to Chicago to visit her, spend some time, and then she hit you back up and said, look, I feel like I'm missing this, this, and this. Come on back out. And that was a game changer for her. And then when you look at Roger, when you look at Cole, you look at all of the individuals that you've worked with one-on-one, I'll talk about the financial side of it because you hear Richard Landis talking about how he just had, a good amount of money deposited into his account and he's just blown away and he's fired up. This is a game changer. And you've talked about it since the day you walked in the door. And we, our ears perked up and we were just like, man, we're dummies. How did we not see this before? This is a game changer for anybody who is a final expense agent right now. These two markets are married together. And the one word that continues to come out of your mouth each and every time we have a conversation about how these two markets are married is compliance. You got to be compliant. But from a high level, if you don't mind, for those that are in podcast land and those that are live with us, talk a little bit about how married these two markets are and how this can be a game changer for an FE agent.
Well, it's very simple. We're running, on average, leads. Our target audience is the lower income spectrum. The ages go from 50 to 85. Now, I know there's some of us that are running filters that kind of narrow those age groups, but in general, final expense is 50 to 85. I would say a good 80% of the people that you see on a final expense lead, whether it's Facebook or direct mail or any other lead, are going to be on Medicare. Even if they're under 65, many of those people, and you guys know this, are going to be disabled. And so you've already got, now you're buying leads for two products. And a lot of the reason we don't sell is because people truly do not have the money to pay $50 a month for that final expense plan. I can assure you that 90% of the people that send lead cards in really do want that life insurance. They actually get it. I know there's a bunch of dumbos out there that send cards in just because there's a card on their desk, but many of those people actually do want the product. And when you go there and you knock on the door, they're surprised. And in some cases, they're embarrassed that they don't have the money to be able to pay for that plan. And there's a compliant way to go about it, and when you do a little bit of digging, and you'll find out if there's 10 plans in a given area, and they're on a Medicare Advantage plan, for instance, there truly is a 10% chance that they're on the right plan. In other words, a 90% chance that they are paying more for their health care and medications, or they are not getting all the benefits that are entitled to them. And you can help them do this. They are not going to be out another dime. In most cases, when you help somebody, you're actually giving them money, essentially, because you're putting them in a place that's going to save them money. And that's the satisfaction, because instead of sitting there as a salesman or saleswoman or salesperson, you are now sitting there as, an advisor to them, a senior advisor. And I promise you, it's like and again, this is something I think we should talk about with the agents that are doing it. The whole atmosphere in the house changes. It goes from this kind of combative, you're trying to win, you're punching and boxing, like, trying to find a gap, trying to find a way in, to they just relax. You can see their shoulders drop and they just relax and open up. And, you have to experience it. And I think, again, I would suggest anyone that wants to do it, don't call me because I'm passionate. I mean, you can hear it in my voice. People make fun of me. Everything that comes out of my mouth, Medicare, Medicare, Medicare. I get it. But speak to these other agents that are doing it now and ask them. I promise you, they are just as passionate as I am, because they realize how this changes people's lives. You don't generally change their lives right away with final expense. It takes a death for that to make sense. With this, it's something they use next month. It impacts them almost immediately.
Yeah, and I know you and James. I'll use James Irwin as an example. James, big producer, over 200K last year, has been a big producer, working with us for years. I remember, and it sticks in my mind, a story that James told me, and I think you even reiterated and shared it with us as well. You and James rode together when you were in town, and there was a lady, a sweet lady who you guys went and visited, and you guys were able to save her like $190 or $200 a month in medications or something like that. And she got back to you, and because of those savings, you guys were able to get her taken care of at a later date on life insurance because of those savings. And she was just crying. You know, she couldn't believe that it was true. And a lot of it comes down to education. Like, a lot of us just don't know about it. And that story right there is powerful in itself. But there's so many stories. Like Roger Chan, I use Roger as an example of, I just didn't know how to get started. And there's so many people out there that don't know how to get started. They don't know how to get involved. And you're such an asset. You're such a resource to be able to say, look, it's not as daunting of a task as you think. You know, getting your certifications done, it's not as bad as you think. You know, you are really that ear and that educator to really help people get started. And some of our guys, like Richard Landis, you know, Roger Chan, Lovely, they'll be the first to say, look, I never would have taken the leap of faith had you not kind of simplified it for me and showed me how to do it. That's powerful that we have that, and that you're able to spend those time with everybody and get out and go see them, show them how to do it. It's unbelievable to see, because the proof is in the pudding, and it's happening, you know, it seems like, well, every month.
Well, I tell you what, Chase, I mean, when I first got into Medicare, I'd heard so much kind of bad publicity about Medicare Advantage, you know, all these IMOs out there chirping about how you're going to lose your license and you're going to get taken to the Medicare chop shop and it's this and it's that. And when I started, I believed that. I got into Medicare supplements, and because I was working rural Texas, I actually did quite well. I think I sold 30-something supplements, or 50 supplements in like the first 2 months. I mean, I had a great start. But remember, I was seeing a ton of people, but the majority of the people were on Medicare Advantage, and I kept walking out of those houses. And I finally said, you know what, screw this. I'm not going to keep walking away from this. I need help with Medicare Advantage. And I must have made 100 phone calls trying to find somebody that would train me to do what I'm doing today. And I couldn't find anybody. Everybody was either final expense or they were Medicare. There was literally nobody out there that could show you how to combine both of them. And I'm a stubborn SOB, and I just put my back into it and figured out how to do it compliantly. And I made a lot of calls, and I asked a lot of questions, and I figured it out. And I think I was speaking to a lot of guys that I've trained up now over the last year did have their license. They've done the AHIP, they've done all the necessary certs, and it was a non-starter. They just didn't know how to take the next step. And I think I know how to take that next step, and I know the people that work with me. I take it personally, man. If you're all in and you want my help, I'm accessible, night and day, for 7 days a week. And you can see the results, it's not showing off. It's a fact. If you commit, I'll commit, and you will be a success. And that's it. It's as simple as that.
Well, talking about that, I mean, and I kind of take it, for those that don't know, there's a really cool story that happened this past AEP, where talking about commitment, talking about, I'll talk the talk, but you also walk the walk. You loaded up and left home for 2 months, 2.5 months, and it was about 2 months. It was about 2 months, but I mean, I spent over 200 and something days on the road last year alone, just training people, and there was an opportunity. I wanted to train some agents. There was an opportunity in New Mexico with United Healthcare. They had asked me to bring a group of agents out, and they were going to give me some leads, and it fell through at the 11th hour, 2 weeks before AEP. And then I was contacted by Aetna in Minneapolis, St. Paul. Aetna was releasing a new product there, and there was a product called
there was a Medicare product that was actually being pulled out of the market, and 400,000 people were losing their cost plans. So I took a team of agents up there, and Aetna gave us some leads. I just showed up at the doorstep at the Humana offices, and first thing they said to me is, "We've got nothing for you." But we ended up getting some support from them too, and I wrote 112 Medicare plans in the first 4 weeks. Ended up with like 134, 135 plans, over 6 weeks, and made myself a big old paycheck in January, and if you take into account the majority of those plans were first time to Medicare at $480 a piece, 100 plans is $48,000. So you start to see the money you make on this. And the real beauty with those plans is, Chase, they're going to be paying me, each and every one of those plans is going to be paying me $240 a year for as long as they're on the books. And
lifetime income.
Lifetime income. So I probably made over 50 grand on this run, and
wow,
I'll be making 25 grand for the next 7.5 years on average, because that's how long these plans stay on the books, on really 5 weeks worth of sales.
That's powerful, because it's not just you're not
incredible.
Just talking the talk. You're walking the walk. I mean, you load it up. Look at a map if you're out there and you don't know exactly how far it is. Texas is a long way away from Minneapolis, and you guys loaded up. I know you, Cole, and your father went, and you guys all, Adam Hoffman, Dylan Uebe, you guys all loaded up, and you went out there and absolutely killed it. It was really cool. You guys were kind of like the EFES astronauts, though you weren't in space. We kept getting that board, texted over to us, and we kept getting the messages like every day it would update, or every week it would update. And you guys did a fantastic job. I think that's powerful because you did it.
That's a good point. My dad had never sold a Medicare Advantage policy. He's 79 years old. So I get these people out there like, I just don't know if I can do this or not. He sold over 50 plans. Adam Hoffman came in there with two plans he'd sold 2 plans. And I think he's over 80 plans or something now. I mean, it's not like anyone can do this. Honestly, it's the first, the learning curve is steep, but it's, once you're over that initial hump, it is smooth sailing. I mean, it's incredible. But I love selling, man. At the end of the day, I love being in people's houses, and so if I have the opportunity, when I travel around the country and I fly out to California, or I'm in Boston, or I'm in Florida. I'm going to be in Florida with Danny Mitchell in Panama City next week. When I'm out there and we're writing business, I don't take that business. The agent gets all that business. Whether I write it or he writes it, it's not always about that. But it was nice. I got to tell you, it was nice to have a few policies under my name for a change.
It's awesome. It was awesome to be tracking that and to be speaking with you when it was going on. And it was seriously like watching the astronauts. You were just checking in, sending pictures. Everybody's rooting for you. We were very excited for you guys. And so as we kind of go back to the personal production side of things, when you were hot and heavy in your schedule for final expense, and even kind of mixing it up and mashing it up now with everything you've learned over the years, let's talk about a little about your routine. What was, it doesn't have to pertain to anybody else, but what was your routine when you were doing it hot and heavy?
Well, I wanted to run 5 appointments a day. And again, because of the area I was running, there's many times I had to drive 2 hours to get to my first appointment. So, and lots of times there would be half an hour to 45 minutes in between appointments, just driving time. So I'd set my appointments about an hour and a half apart. So I'd do the first one at 9. I'd be out of the house by 6:30 or 7 a.m. First one at 9, then 10:30, then 12, then 1:30, then 3. And if people could only see me at night, I'd be 2 hours from home, 7 o'clock at night, running an appointment, and I'd get home sometimes 10, 11 o'clock at night. That was it. So I had an appointment setter, and I actually went through a lot of appointment setters. and some were great, some were bad. But I would just, buy enough leads to keep me busy, and that was it. I mean, it's as simple as that. Walk into the house. I'm not one to, sit there and talk about the flowers in the front yard. I'm a very down to business. I build rapport during the interview, because I want to find out pretty quickly whether or not I'm wasting my time. And I'll be honest, I'm normally in and out of a house in half an hour. There are houses where you get trapped and you sit there chit-chatting for an hour, but I'm there to do business. And if I see that somebody's just there to waste my time, I move on. I just say, thank you very much. I've got another appointment to get to. Pleasure meeting you. If there's anything you need, here's my card. Call me. And obviously adding Medicare in slows things down a little bit, but once you learn my secrets and my methods, you'll see a lot of what I do during my final expense appointment is information gathering for the Medicare portion. So that really is my routine, Chase, and I would work 5 days a week, and Saturdays, if there were some people available on Saturday mornings, I'd go out. But normally Saturday afternoon and Sunday I would take off, and that's kind of how I run my routine to this day.
That's good stuff, and that's one of the most sought after questions that we get is, well, how does this person do this? How do they, what does their day look like? And we get that a lot, so got to ask that, and I appreciate you sharing that with us. One of the things that I do like to go over, and we'll touch on it now, we love talking about the fun stuff. We love talking about the success, but to be able to tell the full story, we got to talk about some of those things that aren't, the pretty things. Let's talk about some bad habits. I love asking on our podcast when we get the one-on-one with the top producer, love asking what their opinion is on their bad habits. What would you say right now when you look back on your career where you first started even till today? What do you feel like maybe one or two or a few of your bad habits are right now?
I think it's the same as what most people have, procrastination. I sometimes let stuff sit and I procrastinate, and I try to be mentally proactive in getting stuff done, whether I like to do it or not. And I've definitely gotten better with that over time. This is a very lonely business. We have our buddies and we've got the group chat and we've got all that other stuff, which I think alleviates a lot of that. But at the end of the day, you're self-employed and you've got nobody coming and kicking you out of bed, making you leave the house. And, I'm human. I fall for some of the same things that everyone else does. And so I have those days where I'm just like, you know what, screw it. I'm going to get out of here at 10. And, but those, I've got to say that, over the last 2 years, 3 years, it's really gotten a lot better. And, so that would be my worst habit. But, I feel so much, it's like being in the gym, right? You don't want to go, especially if you've had a couple months off or a few weeks off. And then you go for a couple of days and you're like, my God, why am I not in this damn gym every single day? And it's the same thing for me. When I put on I get dressed, I put on my shoes, I get in my car, and I plug in the address of my first appointment, it just changes right then and there in the car. I used to take a sticky note, and I'd write on there what I wanted to do for the day financially. So I would never write less than $2,000 a day. That's what I expect out of myself. And I wasn't going to come home until I did it. And so I would take $2,000, a yellow sticky note, and I'd put it right on my steering wheel where I had to look at that damn thing all day. And it's just little things like that to kind of keep me from saying, you know what, I've been kicked in the teeth on these last 4 appointments, I'm just going to go home. It's perseverance, man. You gotta persevere through your bad habits.
I got you. And I appreciate you sharing that with us. It's a good perspective. Once again, it's fun to talk about the clean and pretty items, but sometimes learning what our bad habits are and kind of going over how we overcome those is just as important. One of the things I love to kind of talk about is carriers. in, how you kind of wrap your head around who you write and why you write them. Now, we don't have to go into any particulars about who your favorite carriers are, but how do you select, how did you become familiar with rounding out your carrier rotation? Do you prefer, instant decision? Do you prefer, what's your mindset on how you selected your group of companies that make your go-tos who they are?
Well, first I got to tell you, I made the same mistake that a lot of new people in the industry make is you get all these carriers and you want to write all these carriers. And I looked at my 1099s for my first year in business. I think I got 1099s from 17 different carriers. Now, granted, some of those were Medicare, but 17 different carriers. I gave it to my accountant. I'm just thinking, what the hell am I doing? It's just stupid. And obviously, I figured that out in the first 6 months. And so what I look for in a carrier, and, there's a lot of people that swear by Transamerica and, God bless them. But I want to know before I leave the house whether I've got a deal or not. Running the number of leads that I do, or did, I should say, I didn't have time to go back and revisit those people and go and get signatures or this and that, the typical trans thing. But so my thing was always I needed a carrier that would cover the largest variety of conditions. So if I'm looking at a carrier today, Royal Neighbors just fits the bill, right? I mean, in really all of the United States, diabetes is epidemic. And as far as a diabetic-friendly carrier with no height and weight requirement, it's a no-brainer. Royal Neighbors would absolutely be number one on my list. And, the phone interview, you walk out of the house, you're done. Prosperity, an e-app. Again, you walk out of the house and you're done. I remember I used to come home with 15, 20 applications a week. I had piles and piles and piles and piles of paperwork on my desk, and I recruited poor Nell to do all that scanning and faxing and, emailing and all that nonsense for me. But all that's gone, and so now with the iPad and with these carriers that either have a phone sale or a online application, that is 100% where I'm leaning. And same thing goes with Medicare. I want carriers that have an easy-to-use electronic application. And I walk out of the house, it's done. I slap my hands together. I literally can walk into the house now with a couple business cards and, and my iPad, and I can write 15 different carriers. And so my advice on that would be choose as small a group of carriers as you can possibly get away with. And really, you can get away with 5 or less carriers in final expense easily. And then obviously Medicare is a little different because you have to have the carriers that are in that local market for Med Advantage. But with MedSup, same deal. We've got a variety of carriers that I cherry picked purely to cover not just cost, but underwriting, underwriting various conditions, and just get away with as few carriers as you can get away with.
That's amazing. I love hearing that because, different strokes for different folks. Everybody does it a little bit different, but there's a growing trend in our business overall, all across the United States, that agents want instant decision, and they have for some time. But with technology being the way it is, it just makes sense to be able to give that peace of mind to your client. So I appreciate you sharing that with us. One thing I'd love to kind of pick your brain on, Peter, is, we have those times in this business where you just get beat up, you get punched in the nose a little bit. You touched on persevering in your own personal goals earlier and, having that Post-it note in front of you. If you don't mind, will you share with us a little bit about what's your thought process, what's your ideology regarding when you're having one of those days where you're just getting beat up, you can't give one away? What's your thought process on that?
I try to keep going through those days now, but I will tell you this. So, once you have a little bit of success in this business and you've got some money in the bank and you don't need every single day to be a day of sales, there's times where agents are in desperation phase. They literally got to work to pay the bills. I don't care what you do. If you're at that stage of your life, you get out there and you work your tail off 6-7 days a week. You do whatever it takes to get yourself over that financial hump. But I will tell you that there were days in the field where, whether it was just getting beat up or you just woke up on the wrong side of the bed, a lot of the time the way you feel comes across in the house, the way that you speak to your clients and the way that you're interacting. I will say that there are days when I, decide to pack it in for the day and go and get my attitude straight. I don't feel guilty about it anymore because I work really, really hard. I work a lot of hours. And so if you're having a bad day, sometimes you've got to give yourself a break. But don't do it on every bad day. I would say 90% of those bad days, you're just having a bad run of leads. I mean, it happens. I had a batch. I remember clearly. I was up in southern Michigan, spending the summer. My in-laws had a lake house up there, and I'd basically stop my leads in Texas and just start my leads in Michigan for a month and go work up there. And believe me, it was the same. My numbers never changed, except for this 1 week. I got 50 leads, and I think I had 25 appointments. And I made 2 sales for like $1,100. And I remember clearly one of them was like $800, one of them was $300. And I was driving home on a Friday evening, and the guy called me on the way home and said, I can't afford that plan. So I ended up a week where I spent money on 50 leads, and I came home with $300. And that was just a real kick in the teeth, and it was like that feeling of, screw this, man. I'm going to get out of this business. That following week, I sold $13,000, and for the next 8 weeks in a row, I ended up over $10,000 a week. I did $92,000 in 8 weeks, and it was the best run of my life. And had I given up that week where I got kicked in the teeth, I wouldn't have seen those amazing weeks that followed. And that's the truth. And Josh Jensen will tell you this. I mean, Josh and I have conversations. He calls me up and he's like, we all know what an incredible producer is. And him and I commiserate sometimes, like, I can't believe how crap this business is, man. I don't know what it is. This area sucks, yada, yada, yada. He goes out and works the same area the next week and writes $17,000. It's just sometimes the luck of the draw. And the longer you're in this business, the more you start to understand that it's not the leads, Sometimes it's just you. Sometimes it's just luck. But you've got to keep going. It's like dollar cost averaging, You buy stocks every week on the Dow Jones. There's going to be times where the Dow Jones drops 30%, but those guys at dollar cost average, if you're putting $1,000 a month into buying your stocks, if you look back over 30 years, you've made an absolute fortune, and those down days didn't mean a thing. It was just part of the cycle. And so, if you're having a down day, you're surrounded by people that actually care in this organization. And that's all I would say is reach out to one of us. And I honestly don't feel like I had that camaraderie in the former IMO. There were some really good people in there, but we didn't have the tight kind of system that we do here. And, just remember that advice. You've got to just pull yourself up. If you really need a day off, take a day off. But just get up, go out, rinse, repeat. It will work.
Yeah, it's good advice, and that's exactly why I wanted to ask you that. We did have a text in. We typically don't do anything live on this podcast, but I wanted to throw out there a question that came in from a top producer, Marie Titus, who everybody knows, all-time top producer with EFES. She wanted to know, number one, she said is very impressive, that appointment setting percentage that you have. Do you mind sharing the script, or was that something that your appointment setter has that we can cover at a later date? What are your thoughts on the script?
It was just a very basic script. In fact, I think it was very similar to what Ben has in Dropbox. But keep in mind, people say, how do you get 20 plus appointments in a week? When you're running 50 leads a week, and sometimes I bought in extra leads, doing kind of what Holden Hassel is doing now. I'd say, you got an extra 100 leads there, I'd pick them up. My appointment setter literally had 2,000 leads to call through. So it comes down to leads, guys. I know, when I was up training with Marie, I know that I think she was running 20 leads a week. I don't know what I would do with 20 leads a week. I'm not Lovely Johnson. Lovely just walks down the streets and people run out the door and she goes inside and rearranges their furniture for her. I'm not Lovely, but, I just overloaded with leads, and your inventory builds and builds and builds and builds and builds. And in hindsight, had I had agents under me at that time, I would have given those leads away and, maybe put them at a slightly lower contract, but given them free leads, because I must have wasted, honestly, half my leads. Probably were never touched. So it's just sheer volume, just absolute sheer volume.
The good thing is, for somebody like yourself, you gave yourself an opportunity because you had leads. And I think that's one of the points that I don't want anybody to miss on this call, is that you've always made sure that you're loaded up. You always had that inventory on the shelves so that purchases could be made. And I always thought that's a big point, that it's not about, Peter getting on here or me getting on here, Ben or whoever, trying to sell leads. We're losing money selling leads, guys. It's about giving yourself an opportunity to have that activity level as high as possible. And you've always had that. Last but not least, Peter, I got to ask this question, and I appreciate you giving us almost an hour today. I got to ask this question whenever we end the podcast, the last question that we throw out there. For those that are maybe listening in right now in podcast land that are not with us, or somebody who's live with us right now, what's the biggest lesson you've learned the hard way in this business? Something that punched you in the face over your duration of doing this?
Well, I think it comes back to selecting the carriers that you write. One of the quickest ways to get your butt kicked out of this business is to not handle your chargebacks, and that was a lesson that I learned like everybody else. I was experimenting. I wanted to write different carriers. Part of it was just that, experimenting. I wanted to see, am I missing out by not writing Transamerica? Am I missing out by not writing, this company and that company? And I ended up having some of those policies fall off the books. And then it was like, man, I needed to start writing checks. And I remember I had a couple months where I had a bunch of chargebacks. I mean, it's part and parcel of the business. And that really was my biggest, wake up call, that I needed to kind of choose the carriers I was going to run with. And in some cases, even if it was $2, $3 a month more, don't sell based on price. Sell what you got in your bag. Sell what you want to sell within reason. I mean, obviously, I'm not going to write somebody a policy for $100 when I can get them the same coverage for $53. That would be unethical. But if there's a couple dollars difference and, your carrier's $3 more expensive than the next carrier down, write your carrier, guys. Believe in your carrier and write carriers that you believe in. If you don't like the company, you shouldn't be selling them. So that really was my biggest lesson. Positive lesson: get into Medicare. If you're not doing it yet, you are missing the boat. You are truly, truly missing the boat. And Chase, what I'd love you to do here in the next couple of weeks is maybe, interview somebody like Richard Landis, who I think Roger Tan called him month after month after month. Richard, you got to do this. Richard, you got to do this. And he finally got into it. And Richard called me a couple of weeks ago to tell me I'd got this big check in the mail and just thanked me for changing his career. And, I didn't do the work. Richard did that. He just made that decision to, get through it. And I encourage all of you to get involved, because it'll absolutely, if this is what you want to do and insurance is for you and you love the business, this will make you love it 10 times more, I assure you. And you're going to end up in 5 years' time making 10 times more money.
Well, I appreciate you jumping on and spending some time with us. And I will tell you, we've got Roger Chan next Friday, and then we will definitely try and get Richard Landis on the following week, because that would be a heck of a back-to-back there. But, Peter, as always, man, we appreciate you joining us today. And for those of you listening in, Medicare Madness, Monday, 10 a.m. Central Standard Time. Same login, same passcode if you want to join us live. If not, you can go to iTunes if you're an iOS user, iPhone user, and you can hit subscribe. Look up EFES Live, hit subscribe, and you'll have it all come right to your device. Now, if you're an Android user, you can go to the Google Play Store, check it out, and you'll be able to get all of the content there as well. But plug in Medicare Monday. You're going to get to hear Peter and Cole do their thing. It's a great show, great podcast. I have the luxury of getting those before everybody else to be able to listen to them, and I'm telling you, they're pure entertainment, very informative. So jump on that. And then Wednesdays, 10 a.m., we've got Insurance in Your Face with Ben Bowman and myself, and we hope to see you guys on those podcasts. Tune in, hit subscribe. If you don't know how, let us know. If you want to get involved in Medicare, once again, we can get you in touch with Peter. Peter's more than happy to give you his info. We'd love to get you plugged in, even if it's just a conversation to learn more about it. If this podcast intrigued you, you want to learn more, just let us know. And Peter Walker, as always, man, I appreciate you.
My pleasure, Matt. Take care, buddy. Have a great weekend.
All righty. And guys and gals, if there's anything that we can help you with, if you're currently working with EFES, you know that we're here to help. 800-765-0711. We're always here to help, and we hope you guys have an awesome and productive Friday.